So what did you think of it? 5.2, give us the review.
Yeah, so we did indeed have early access to GPT 5.2. And, when it comes to evaluating any new model, we're really going to ask three questions, right? What are the sort of innate reasoning capabilities of the model? We have our own internal benchmark. It's called a Big Law Bench. It measures the ability of LLMs to complete real world legal tasks. The second question is, how does the model perform in the product? Right, we're going to wire the model up in the product, and we're going to run end-to-end evals across sort of our key product surfaces. And then the third question is, what do the lawyers think? Right. And this is actually, my favorite part of the sort of new model eval process is it's more unstructured testing. So we'll give the model to our internal lawyers. What they're really probing for are sort of step change improvements in things like legal
So you
research.
give it to the customers.
To our internal lawyers. So at Harvey, we have a
Ah,
legal research team internally. They're all former big law attorneys. Yeah.
got it. Okay, so three vectors. You've got the benchmarking. You've got the lawyers. So how are people thinking about it?
Yeah, so these three kind of signals coalesce into our general opinion of the model and sort of what emergent behaviors we've seen. In terms of overall performance, we're actually quite impressed with the model's performance. So on Big Law Bench, this is our public benchmark. It's the second highest scoring model we've seen to date. So it's inherently a strong legal reasoner. But I think the thing that stood out to us most about this model in particular was the model's inherent sort of guardrails. Right. So this came out in our unstructured testing phase, and we noticed an inherent or sort of emergent behavior where the model displayed stronger capability awareness. Right. So it's able to ask itself things like, do I have enough information to answer this question? What can I do? What can't I do? Should I bring a human into the loop? These sort of behaviors were pretty prominent and noticeable and are actually extremely beneficial for our platform.
Who was number one on the benchmark?
So that is actually GPT 5.1, right?
Oh,
So what we see is the frontier models from each lab. So GPT 5.1, GPT 5.2, Sonnet 4.5, and of course, Gemini 3 Pro. They're converging to the same sort of mean or average level of performance on our benchmark. And that's what we consider sort of the frontier cohort.
help me understand the calculus here for these model companies in terms of when they decide that this is a decimal point increase, a 5.1, a 5.2 increase versus, hey, this is a brand new model. What do the deltas here look like, and when do they decide that, oh, this is enough of a big step that we should launch a new model altogether?
Yeah, it's an incredibly challenging problem. I think the model providers are working by proxy on the benchmarks that they can create, right? And the big challenge there is, can you build benchmarks that are representative of the ways in which these models will be used in the real world, right? And so the model providers will make progress. They'll hill climb against these benchmarks. When they've seen meaningful improvements, they'll give them to model consumers like ourselves
Hmm.
and ask us for feedback. Right. And so a big thing we're looking for are sort of these step changes in behavior, emergent behaviors, and it's sort of a feedback cycle.
So you were overall impressed with the model. I wonder, when you talk about feedback, what feedback did you give to OpenAI in saying, hey, this could use some work?
Yeah. So, I mean, the strongest piece of feedback we gave was certainly around the model guardrails, right? And this isn't necessarily negative feedback. We were actually impressed with this performance, but it was an emergent behavior that we hadn't seen from the GPT sort of predecessors. In
Hmm.
terms of room for improvement, I think the things that we identified were, the model is a bit rigid in terms of styling, formatting. It has its own sort of preferences baked into its weights there, and it's harder to coax out these changes in prompting. And then with legal specific use cases, we did see the model perform notably better on transactional legal work than on litigation work. So these are the kind of feedback signals we're giving.
And I just want to go back to again where you said 5.1 was highest on your benchmark. So based on your comparisons of 5.1 and 5.2 against Gemini 3, Gemini 3 is the one that made a lot of noise. You're putting 5.1 and 5.2 ahead of Gemini 3 right now. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, and what we're talking about here are decimal points of difference, right? So the current leaderboard is 5.1, 5.2, Sonnet 4.5, and Gemini 3 Pro. Again,
Okay.
these are within marginal mean kind of differences. The thing
And
that's more important for us is not the mean score, but where are the sharp edges for the subtasks of legal work that we're most interested in.
let me ask you a question here about this trend that there's this race to develop the best model and find which model is the strongest. There's also a discussion saying, hey, people might not need the best model all the time. We hear this discussion coming up with open source models that, hey, we just want to customize the model for what we need it for. Where do you sort of land on this spectrum of we should be focused on the best model, or we should be focused on making a custom model that is just good enough for what our company needs?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, the framing here is entire AI ecosystem is moving at warp speed, right? We had GPT 5.2 yesterday, Gemini 3 Pro, and GPT 5.1 just a month ago, and Sonnet 4.5 about 2 months before that. So things are moving really, really fast. At the application layer, we're of course also familiar with urgency and sometimes what it takes to drive urgency. The things that we are prioritizing above everything else are model performance, production readiness, and client preferences, right? So model performance is measured by the benchmarks we just mentioned. Things like production readiness do come into play, and our trade-offs with quality, right? So things like security and privacy, regional availability, and latency, reliability, all of these things do factor into the model we ultimately end up shipping to production.
Great. Well, Niko, thanks for coming on the show. It's great to have your review, and we will talk to you again very soon.
Thank you.